A surgeon makes a terrible diagnosis. A CEO tanks his company. Your friend confidently gives you advice that ruins your week. What do all these people have in common? They're smart. Sometimes, the smartest people make the dumbest decisions. And the worst part? They have no idea it's happening. Let's start with a man named Justin Kruger. In 1995, he robbed 2 banks in broad daylight. No mask. No planning. When arrested, he was genuinely shocked. He thought he was invisible because he'd covered his face with lemon juice, believing it would make him invisible to security cameras. He was confident. He was completely wrong. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger discovered something unsettling. People with low ability often overestimate their competence. They don't know what they don't know. But here's the twist. The effect works both ways. Truly competent people often underestimate their abilities because they understand how much complexity exists. A master pianist knows thousands of subtle techniques. A beginner thinks it's just pressing keys. The beginner is more confident. You've seen this everywhere. The person who just finished one self-help book thinks they're a life coach. The gym beginner who lifted weights once is suddenly an expert on nutrition. The problem is dangerous. Confidence without knowledge leads to poor decisions. You take risks you shouldn't take. You pursue paths that don't work. You speak with authority about things you barely understand. Your brain is not a camera. It doesn't record reality. It filters reality through what you already believe. This is confirmation bias. Once you believe something, your brain actively seeks out evidence that confirms it and ignores evidence that contradicts it. Here's a study that proves this. Researchers showed smokers and non-smokers the exact same health studies about smoking. Smokers remembered more studies that downplayed smoking risks. Non-smokers remembered more studies that highlighted the dangers. Same information. Different brains. Different conclusions. You do this constantly. You believe a political party is corrupt, so you notice every scandal they're involved in while ignoring the scandals of your preferred party. You decide someone is lazy, so you attribute their missed deadline to laziness, not to the emergency they told you about. You think a business opportunity is good, so you focus on success stories while dismissing the warnings of people who failed. This bias is so powerful that smarter people often fall victim to it more intensely. Why? Because intelligent people are better at constructing arguments to support what they already believe. They can rationalize almost anything. They're convincing themselves more effectively than less intelligent people can. The result is confidence in false beliefs. You become increasingly certain about things that are increasingly false. You spent 8 years in a career you hate. You're miserable every day. But you tell yourself you have to stay because you've already invested 8 years. Those 8 years are gone. They're sunk costs. But your brain treats them like future costs. This is the sunk cost fallacy. And it makes brilliant people do irrational things. Consider a real example. An investor puts $100,000 into a failing business. The business is bleeding money. It will almost certainly fail. But he invests another $50,000 to save his original investment. That's not strategic thinking. That's sunk cost fallacy. He's throwing good money after bad. The painful truth is simple. Past investments should not influence future decisions. Your future is determined by your current position and your future choices, not by what you've already spent. But our brains don't work that way. We hate loss. We especially hate loss when we've invested our own resources. So we keep investing, trying to recover what we've already lost. People stay in bad relationships because they've already invested years. People finish bad books because they've already read 200 pages. People pursue failing projects at work because they've already spent months on them. The smarter you are, the better you can rationalize staying. You can construct compelling arguments for why this time will be different, why persistence will pay off. But sometimes, the smartest decision is to cut your losses and move on. After you see a car accident, you suddenly notice how many car accidents there are. You think driving is more dangerous than it actually is. This is availability heuristic. Your brain judges the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. A plane crash is rare, but it's dramatic. It gets news coverage. It gets discussed. So people overestimate the risk of flying while underestimating the risk of driving, even though driving is statistically far more dangerous. Your recent experiences dominate your perception of reality. If you just had a bad date, you think all dating is hopeless. If you just had a great day, you think your life is perfect. If you just saw a news story about crime, you think crime is everywhere. Smart people fall for this constantly because they use their intelligence to remember relevant examples. A psychologist sees a depressed patient and overestimates how common depression is in the population. A lawyer sees criminals and overestimates crime rates. A doctor sees sick people and underestimates how healthy the general population is. They're not stupid. They just have cognitive access to unrepresentative samples. This bias influences major life decisions. You avoid a career because you heard about one person who failed. You invest in something because you heard about one person who succeeded. You make health decisions based on one friend's experience. Recent and vivid memories feel true. But feeling true is not the same as being true. 93% of American drivers rate themselves as above average. This is mathematically impossible. Yet it's true. This is overconfidence bias. We systematically overestimate our abilities, our knowledge, and our control over future events. The more educated you are, the worse this bias often becomes. A study of physicians showed that confident doctors made diagnostic errors just as often as less confident doctors. But patients trusted the confident doctors more. Overconfidence led to poor medical outcomes. The problem compounds in teams. When everyone is overconfident, nobody questions anything. A startup team is certain their product will succeed. They don't do proper market research. They don't listen to criticism. They're confident. And they fail. In finance, overconfident investors trade too frequently, thinking they can time the market. Research shows they actually perform worse than those who rarely trade. In business, overconfident leaders make aggressive decisions without adequate planning. In relationships, people are overconfident they understand their partners. You think you know what someone is thinking. You're often wrong, but you're certain you're right. The mechanism is simple. You remember your successes vividly. You remember your failures vaguely or rationalize them as bad luck. Your brain constructs a narrative where you're more capable than you actually are. This feels good. But it leads to bad decisions. You take risks you're not prepared for. You enter situations you can't handle. You fail in ways that surprise you, even though you shouldn't be surprised. The good news is that awareness helps. Not as much as we'd like, but it helps. Here's how to catch yourself in these mental traps. First, when you feel very confident about something, pause. Ask yourself what you might be wrong about. Write down the opposite perspective. Force yourself to Steelman the other side. Second, examine your sources of information. Are you only consuming information that agrees with you? Actively seek out credible sources that contradict your beliefs. Third, when making a decision based on past investments of time or money, ignore the past completely. Ask yourself, if I were starting fresh today, would I make this same choice? If the answer is no, you're probably caught in sunk cost fallacy. Fourth, challenge your recent experiences. When you feel something is common or important, ask for statistics. Look at data. Don't trust the vividness of your memory. Fifth, write down your confidence levels before important events. After the events occur, check how often you were right. Most people discover they're right much less often than they thought. This recalibration changes how you approach decisions. Finally, surround yourself with people who disagree with you. People who will challenge your thinking. Who will point out your blind spots. Your brain is extraordinary, but it's also deeply flawed. Smart people make dumb decisions because intelligence doesn't protect you from these biases. Sometimes intelligence makes you better at defending them. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. When you see the trap, you can choose to step around it. Your brain is powerful, but it's not rational. It's predictably irrational. And once you understand how, you can make better choices. If this changed how you think about your own decisions, subscribe to Mind Architect. Hit the bell notification so you never miss a video about the psychology that shapes your life. Because understanding yourself is the first step to becoming who you want to be.